The stuff I do, they say is wrong. So there was a stretch of years where everything I knew how to do stopped working. All the systems, all the best practices, all the carefully built routines, they weren't exactly gone. I just couldn't do them. You probably don't have to have 5 years of unrelenting trauma, grief, and loss to relate. And if you do, well, all right. But let me give you an example of other things that might come into play. You might think they're of less amplitude, although they aren't. Getting back on your food plan. That's an example. The one you couldn't do, the one you cannot do in spite of everything that you know. And you know a lot, don't you? I know a lot. I'm the same. You planted seeds, tilled the ground, carted that extra weight around for decades, put it on, taken it off, ad nauseum. Then there's the relationship that's not working. The behaviors that you accept or that you do. No matter how much support you got, what you gave, what you're willing to receive, you just couldn't do it. Your lifetime slip sliding away, years, months. Anyway, those are just some examples. I've studied that space of what I call the choice point. I've studied it relentlessly because I guess that's where I was stuck or where I felt stuck, though I really don't like the use of that word. Stuck seems to imply some kind of fault, that if I would just think better, somehow things would change. And I don't know about you, but I couldn't think my way out. Nothing that came from the thinking mind could really solve what was going on. The events just needed attention. I needed to attend to the woundings in a way that modalities didn't support. To be with it like I was in the intensive care unit, unsure when I'd get out. Right? Intensive care is like that. I had a friend or two who'd walk the wild with me, and they did do that. But it was well and beyond what most people have capacity for. And of course, there were limits. So I turned inward, trying to hold space for my own parts. That was trickier. Content attempting to hold content. If you've been following me, you know what I mean. And then context appeared. Conscious awareness, it appeared. Conscious awareness is context, not content. And my ability to make choice opened up again. I studied choice points because when I was going through those 5 years of iterations, so many iterations of Dark Nights of the Soul, I just couldn't find it. I couldn't find choice points. For my life, for my one very precious life, just like you have one very precious life, I couldn't find choice points. I couldn't find a choice point where I could do any practices. And there were practices that I knew would help, but they weren't implementable in that space. Trauma, grief, loss, the fire, losing my eyesight, my RVOT, that's a potentially fatal heart arrhythmia that takes out sports people in the regular. That didn't want to stay fixed. 3 tries. Estrangement, betrayal. I could barely function. The only thing I consistently showed up for was my consulting job. At the time, it didn't feel like much. Looking back, it was enormous. So here's what doesn't fit in the historic or current healing paradigm. When I couldn't do the routines anymore, I just didn't force them. I didn't white knuckle any morning practices because I couldn't. I didn't override my body to try to get it to do something it didn't want to do because I couldn't. I didn't try to talk my way back into stability somehow because I couldn't. It wasn't really a crack that appeared. It was more like a feral animal seeking ground it didn't yet understand. It was like a sacred withdrawal, claiming of the interior. And can't really pinpoint when it started to ease up. In retrospect, I was preparing ground for as long as it took for choice points to emerge. The places and spaces where I was to come alive again in meaning and purpose, not based in what others thought I needed. What I do know is that hibernation was a witnessing. I needed to be in that space for life to move forward again. So I stayed with myself. Even though I felt pretty broken, even when I feared judgment, a deep native intelligence was exerting itself, and I allowed it. I stopped shaming myself. I stopped criticizing. I stopped analyzing. I stopped trying to fix it. Stopped trying to attempt to fit into other people's timelines of what they thought I needed. It was apparent that season of my life was over, burned out of me in an internal fire. It raged for quite some time. Then gradually, conscious awareness emerged as the citadel, my chalice, and my homecoming. It took a couple of years for me to see the architecture of what had been happening. In that time, I began to make small movements, beginning with 1 to 2 minutes of taking refuge a day. When space started to open up, I would sit for some moments and let something take root. Then I was done. It wasn't a 30-minute meditation, not a perfect nervous system protocol, not a productivity pattern. Those few minutes were absolute gold. Exactly what was needed. And here's what most people misunderstand. When I say I paid attention to my thoughts and feelings, people hear wallowing. They hear getting stuck, staying stuck. They hear not getting on with it. I tell you, nothing could have been further from the truth. Something that I really believe is that each of us knows how to find our way when we're met with real holding from another human being. And when that real holding from another human being isn't available, we have to find another source. In my own life, there weren't many people who could witness me without agenda. So something native emerged. It wasn't mentalizing. It wasn't strategic. And it wasn't self-help. It was conscious awareness. And from there, I experienced acceptance reflected back to me with no shame, no just do this, no implication of what's wrong with you, no guilt. That was monumental. It saved my life. What some might have called wallowing was the most precise turning towards myself I ever could have done. It's also the place most human beings are deeply uncomfortable. Most people can't enter the igloo of the dark night and sit there without managing it. Even in grief circles, someone shares their heart and the room fills with suggestions, strategies, medication ideas, praise for having a good day, or ways to find a way to have a good day. It's incredibly difficult to sit beside someone in pain and not try to improve them. But that space of being met without pressure to be different, that's where my true healing began. Not because someone fixed me, and it wasn't because I figured it out. it was because I was finally being met. And when others couldn't meet me there, I learned to stand in conscious awareness and let it meet me. I guess that's the wrong thing that I do. I build my days around returning home to that space. I watch my levels of what I call activation. I feel tension rising. I notice it. When my system goes beyond what I know is good for me, I stop. 30 seconds, 2 minutes, 10 minutes, if it's needed. I name the thoughts in context. I follow the feelings in context. I drop back into conscious awareness. I'm not perfect at it, but I don't need to be. That's why it's called a practice. Woven throughout the day. I don't see any of this as any kind of philosophy. It's my inner bearing now, my North Star, the fabric of my being, the warp and weft of the life I live. It's right here. And from here, capacity flourishes, choice becomes available, organization returns, desire sparks, creativity dances, not because I forced any of it, but because it grows from that ground. The thinking mind is always doing push-ups, problem solving, analyzing, correcting, making better plans. It is not what saved me, and it isn't what keeps me steady now. Awareness does. Conscious awareness. Standing in it again and again. It is not flashy. I don't even think it markets well. It isn't optimized, but it's the only thing that's really reliably worked. If you're exhausted from trying to heal correctly, if you're forcing yourself into systems that suffocate you, that threaten to suck the little bit of spark and light that's in you into perpetual darkness, if you're tired of being given answers when what you need is companioning, maybe the most profoundly unapologetic and courageous thing you can do is to pause. Not to fix, not to improve, and not to become. Just to notice. And to let that noticing be held. Everything in my life grows from that. Thanks for being here today. Talk to you soon.